Hello, everyone. We hope you enjoyed watching Brooklyn, inshallah. My name is Wesam Shahed, and I'm part of the Chicago Palestinian Film Festivals Committee, and specifically in charge of the donor relations with the film festival. Now, we have an exclusive Q&A with the director of Brooklyn, inshallah, Ahmed Mansour. Ahmed was born and raised in the Gaza Strip in Palestine. He was a graduate of NYU's Arthur Carter's Journalism Institute, specifically the news and documentary program at the school. His debut film, Brooklyn, inshallah, is a feature documentary that was released in 2019 and premiered at many prestigious film festivals, such as in New York City, the Toronto Palestinian Film Festival, and POV magazine specifically wrote that Ahmed Mansour has made a verite film about democracy in action. Ahmed was named 2019's Mountain Film Emerging Filmmaker Fellow, based out in Telluride, Colorado. Ahmed is the co-founder and head of productions at Philistia Film Festivals. Assalamu alaikum, ya Ahmed, and thank you for joining us today. Ahmed, how are you doing?
I'm good. You're impressive in introducing me. You have passion.
Thank you, Ahmed. No, speaking of impressive, well, Brooklyn, inshallah, was nothing but impressive. For those of you in the audience, this was my personal favorite film and so far in this film festival. So thank you so much, Ahmed, for all your hard work, and our community really appreciates it. Ahmed, out of all the movie ideas that you could have possibly came up with when you were sitting there brainstorming, why did you choose to follow the stories and these individuals centered in Brooklyn, inshallah?
Well, I feel the story chose me rather than I chose the story. When I came to the U.S., I came to the U.S. in August 2015, the last few months of President Obama, and once I started realizing the new country I'm in, because it's the first country I visited straight out of Gaza. So, I was like dealing with the cultural shock, dealing with the new language, getting to know the country. And while I'm in the process, President Trump won the election. Yep. And of course, his campaign's promises were nothing but targeting people exactly like who I am, Palestinians, people of color, Arabs, Muslims. So I was like, I felt, like when you have an image, a existing image about the United States, as a young man growing up in the Middle East, everybody wants to come to America. So when I came here and then Trump won, I had this kind of conflict in my head. So I had to do something, otherwise I'll go crazy. Yeah. So I was one time I wanted like coffee, Arab coffee. I was a recent comer.
The best kind of coffee.
Yeah, and like spices, parat. So they told me that there is an Arab neighborhood. So I went there and I was stunned. I felt like I was back in Gaza because all the names were in Arabic, Arabic all over the streets.
Yeah.
And then I've heard like there was an event in one of the restaurants on Fifth Avenue in Bay Ridge about like this guy who named himself as the first Arab American Palestinian Lutheran Christian pastor to ever run for New York City Council.
Wow.
I was like, damn, all of this in one. And that was like the tip of the ice, even like.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I talked to him. I was like, okay, I go to NYU and can I follow your campaign? And this is how I started it. And I really followed it for months and months and months. And I filmed over 600 hours of footage. And
wow.
Because I resonated with it, like I felt the campaign represented me. Even,
wow.
One reason also before I shut up is when I learned that only 250 out of 40,000 Arab Americans in Bay Ridge voted. like I was really mad because back home, I lost so many close friends and family members, and my dad got in prison, like
Yeah,
that's the situation.
of course.
And why all of that is because to have our own statehood and to be able to vote and to elect our own government
Right,
in a sovereign Palestine.
of course.
And it's my dream in my life is to vote. I've never voted in my life, and to come here and find this insane number of Arab Americans who are not participating in the democratic process uh, while they can, it felt insane to me. So as I started filming, of course, there are reasons on why they're not
Of
voting,
course. Of course.
which is basically the story of the film.
And Ahmed, your movie is just another step towards engaging our, Arab community to go out there and vote. I mean, we definitely need pushes here and there. A lot of our community members don't vote, and that's a huge problem in our community. And a lot of people have been tackling that. In Brooklyn, inshallah, is just another tool to push our community to you really use those rights that we have. And sometimes people might take for granted. Like you pointed out, Ahmed, there's people overseas, right, who are fighting and dying for this type of opportunity to vote. Ahmed, you talked about that this story really resonated with you. What type of theme or message did you want to leave your viewers at the end of Brooklyn, inshallah, with?
Well, I do not have a specific. I like if I would say a specific theme, I would be lying because you watched it. It has so many layers. The story.
Right.
I mean, first it's any immigrant story. It's like any immigrant community in the United States, right? Struggling to be part of the system.
Of course.
Second, the being in Arabs in this country, and especially after 9/11, being an Arab American, especially Muslims in New York City, it's like hell. And then you go to the political representation, none before this campaign, none, right? And then you go to the surveillance, and then you go to the deportation, and then you go to the voting suppression. So it's like and racism and white supremacy and people would like to vote for Hitler rather than voting for an Arab. So it's like so many layers. So like it took me really long time in editing, and way more than I expected, is because so many and I decided to make it like in a cinema verite form, which is the classical style of a documentary. So like very few interviews, no narration. Is like the story gets told through the unfolding of events on the screen, because I want it to be as true as possible, because this issue, being an Arab American, to make a story of an Arab American in the United States of America under Trump, it's already controversial. So I wanted to make it in a way that I had no idea what the audience can get out of it. But to be honest, touring with the film at the festival circuit, I got really like so many different reactions, tears, pride, sorrow, tragedy, because it touched, of course, the Arab audiences, the Muslim audiences, the whites, the Latino, because of the layers of the story, it spans the reach of these themes to different, audiences.
Yeah, no, and all those reactions very well deserved, Ahmed. I mean, your movie was able to touch on multiple different races, not just the Arab community. For instance, I mean, in your movie, the father al-Yatim's manager, his voting manager, she was a white woman, right? And I want to talk a bit about. Let's go dive into the movie for a second. Let's start at the beginning. You talked about the style of the film, the verite film, and how you wanted to minimize that documentary feel and make it as real as possible. So when the father is campaigning and he's out there and all his managers on the scene, his voters are on the scene. How did your team feel at the outset? Were things challenging to follow them around and capture everything as raw as possible?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. There was that scene where we followed Father Khadr at the Republican debate.
That's right. That's right. And he got approached by someone, you know.
Yeah, so this is we captured it on camera and we decided to put it there to show what didn't make it
Right.
to be part of the film. It was every time we were filmed. So Bay Ridge is very interesting. Bay Ridge is, or southern Brooklyn, where Bay Ridge is the last strong Republican stronghold in New York City.
Okay.
So you have Fifth Avenue in Bay Ridge. On the right, you have the Arab Americans. On the left, you have the Italian, the Irish, the white population, right? And they really these are the Republicans and very wealthy.
Yeah.
And the senator for the 43rd for like the southern district of Brooklyn was Goldie Martin. He was the state senator for like the last 20 years, and he said literally after 9/11 that five of the hijackers of 9/11 hijackers came from the mosque of his district.
God.
So it's like it's very intense.
Yeah.
And I get kicked out, spat at, shot at so many times, but thank God I'm immune to this because I'm coming from a place like Gaza, so I know how to deal with this situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot. Even among the Arab communities. First, when I showed up with my camera, I felt like immediately this is my community. I talked to them in Arabic. I thought I'm gonna get accepted very quickly, but at the beginning it was very hard. I asked to shut the camera a lot in the campaign office by our fellow Arab Americans because at the beginning they didn't trust me, and like why? And it's because the camera, like for some of them, was perceived as a form of surveillance.
They thought they were being watched, right?
Because they've been watched since after 9/11, and their houses got raided, and they planted cameras were found. Undercover agents were discovered. So there's no trust.
There's no trust.
You know, I could be undercover for them, right? So I shut the camera for a while. I kept it at home, and I kept showing up as a normal person, talking to the people, telling them my personal story, and that really worked out when they realized where I'm coming from, who am I. So yeah.
And okay, so when you keep showing up time and time again, you know, I noticed you took the time to actually do, you know, private interviews or highlight, you know, Father Yatim's campaign manager and also his individual volunteers who were on the front line, which, by the way, instead of just focusing on the main cast, you took the time to highlight these individuals. Why did you take the time to highlight, you know, Father Yatim's campaign manager and all these volunteers who were on the front line? What was the idea behind that?
You know, again, this is the craft, right? Yeah, I'm making a film. I'm not making a profile piece on Father Khadr or Linda or Kayla or Abir, right?
Yeah.
So like when I stepped in the neighborhood, I had no idea of what I was getting into. Every time, like I was like, oh, I nailed it. This is what I'm gonna focus on, and then I discover another layer. And I'm like, so how to deal with it? Like what shall I focus on and what shall I leave behind? And it was such.
I was going to say, you even focused on Father Yatim's competitor, Justin. I forgot his last name, but
Justin Brannon.
Yeah, that you even took the time to go to his campaign office and, you know, sit down with him, and you recorded him in a bit.
Exactly, because it was such an not ethical even. It's a story. All the elements has to be it, and it's the story of a neighborhood. You see, this is the dilemma that I had to face from the beginning.
Mm.
Is it a superhero film? Is it a profile piece? Is it um, what is it?
Right.
And all of the stories that I heard, and you cannot really, when you hear a story and it affects you, it's really hard to leave it behind.
Mm.
So so it turned out to be it's a whole neighborhood story.
Yeah.
So the trick was how to tell the story in such a way that anybody who would watch the film would get a taste of really the neighborhood as all, from the conservatives, even the Republicans. There's scenes of the Republicans
Right.
debates and this and the adversary, the team's adversary, and the teams, and even within the team, like Abir, we go to her house to see why she's volunteering for the campaign.
Yeah.
She had a personal story, and Linda's. So it's like it wasn't easy. That's for a fact. It was
Right.
never easy to
Of course.
go to land on each one of them, and then bring it all of it together. It was such a
It was a challenge.
adventure,
An
a
adventure.
challenge, and
An adventure.
I'm glad that it came in a way where it wasn't it wasn't like kind of jumpy and people were like,
No.
oh, where we go, like it was in a way that digestible, if
Absolutely.
it's even a word.
No, that definitely is. Ahmed, I want to talk a bit about some interesting things that when you were on the campaign trail that your team managed to pick up, especially on the day of the election. Two specific instances is that I remember Linda Sosur, she was having issues that we noticed there was a lack of Arabic interpreters. So a lot of the community members were having difficulty voting and knowing who to vote for and how to vote because there wasn't any interpreters there. And also the lack of education of how to vote in the Arab community there, and not just in New York as a whole. That, for instance, I remember after one of the Salat al-Jum'ahs, that one of the women who had just finished praying approached the father's campaign manager, and she asked, "Oh, do I vote here, right at the masjid, right then and there?" What was your thoughts about the lack of education, perhaps, on the voting, and also the lack of interpreters on site for to be able to vote? What was your thoughts on that, Ahmed?
It's the system. It's the system wanted them to be in the dark when it comes to knowing their rights and their voting rights.
Right.
Yes, you could say it's on the communities. It's the community responsibility, and it's each individual's responsibility to know their rights and to vote, of course,
Sure.
right? But that shows you really, and I hope like throughout the film and through Abir's part, um, you saw how much the community suffered
Yes.
from surveillance and deportations and undercover agents. So there was like people thought, like before the Yatim's campaign, some people thought that registering to vote is a way that you give your information to the government to
That they can now
surveil.
watch you. You give out your
See,
address.
and there is legitimacy for it.
Yeah.
There is a legitimacy. If you live in a community that's persecuted, you don't want to give your information to any official party, right? So it's a disaster, but there is grounds of why it's a disaster. Why that woman was like, oh, can I vote here in the masjid while they were registering people? So it's like, yes, jahil, ignorance, but there's a grounds. People didn't choose to own their ignorance. People were forced.
Yeah.
They had to act this way. they were literally in the shadow. Right before this campaign, like even I was talking to people on the streets, people wouldn't talk to me. Like it's that level of
Lack of
I
trust.
yeah, and I don't want to be involved with any official thing
Of course.
because we don't trust them.
So, Ahmed, tell me just big picture. No, we're coming close on our time here. What was the most enjoyable part for you in directing Brooklyn, inshallah, as a whole?
Uh, you know, we have a saying in the filmmaking community that
That's right.
in order to make a film, it takes 95% of sweat and tears, and you end up being broke, and you suffer from loneliness, and maybe get hooked up in whiskey or drugs while you're making it, and 5% is what you want the people to see, which is the film when it comes out.
Wow.
So the most part I enjoyed is when the film really came out after 4 years in the making, full
Wow.
time, and the perception of especially the Bay Ridge people, like Father. I remember Father Khadr and Linda and Abir and all people when they were like some of us, some of them traveled to some festivals, and they cry like they're the main
Wow.
character, and they collapsed even. So like that like paid for the 95%
Wow.
of misery. So
Ahmed, do you still keep in contact with Father Al Yatim and Linda and the cast of the movie that you have?
yeah, I mean I they're very busy, but I keep contact. I'm in contact with them, and like yeah, this past summer we had impact campaign, or before the election we had like few screenings, impact screenings for among the Arab communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I've been like for the last few months I've been in the high editing uh
And
film.
and
So
Ahmed, what based on your work on this film, the lessons that you and your team learned and the hard work just with everyone from the cast to yourself to everyone involved with the process of making this film, what advice would you give to any Falastini or Arab who wants to run for office one day, whether it's locally like Father Al Yatim or even nationally potentially? What would you say based off of what you saw?
what I saw at the beginning when Father Khadr ran is that everybody was like pessimistic. We're like, oh, are you running? Like, you're not going to win. You have only 250 registered to vote among in your community. So it's like, at first, it looks so hard. And also, you find little encouragement from the elderly among our
Mhm.
community,
Okay, of
because they had their experience, and of course, they their perspective is shaped by their own experience, and their own
course.
experience was not good in terms of building a political representation. But my advice is that anybody who any like Palestinian Arab American in any town or city across the states, they should run without thinking about running. They should first run, because then everything, we are really we are woke. We know what injustice is. We know what uh, like we're decent people, and
Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
when we really talk and we knock on doors, talk to people, and when we give speeches, people connect like with us in a way that you didn't expect. So the beginning, every beginning is hard, but Father K's story and campaign, and
Father K.
the one that I managed to like document in this film shows that how like it's an epic journey from almost zero, like no, there were nobody, to have a solid political representation. So
Right.
I would suggest that everyone would watch the story and really learn how the beginning is hard and the middle is messy, but the end is really rewarding.
Really rewarding. No, and then Ahmed, my final question here, and without getting into too much detail and spoiling all the fun, can you tell the audience a bit about what's the next project that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I am working with the great director Ziad Fote. I'm co-directing this film called Return to Ramallah. Is about a father who goes back to Ramallah for the first time in 40 years after
40,
he was
my God,
exiled.
40 years.
And he takes his daughter with him. And he, of course, raised his daughter here to be a proud Palestinian. So, and when they go there, the father romanticization about Palestine is stopped at the age of 13. But the daughter, when she went there, she didn't see what her father raised her up on. So basically the story is very interesting in terms of exploring the relation between the second generation of Palestinian Americans and the first generation Palestinians, and how it goes in terms of what is actually Palestine for the first generation and the second generation, because clearly, maybe you can share also this with me. It's sometimes it can be unclear.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yes.
in this film, we're trying to tackle this in a way in which we provide an example of this family's journey, which is an epic journey, and really we can give this service to the Palestinian American community, in which they can resonate with it, and how the first generation and the second generation can finally understand each other. Hopefully.
No. You'll make sure it hits, and it will. Inshallah. Well, I mean, Ahmed, you've done such a phenomenal job with just Brooklyn, inshallah. Thank you so much for your time just with this Q&A session. I know our audience for sure appreciates your time and your work in our Palestinian community. We hope and we will see you continue just to rise as a movie director in the future. And I'm personally looking forward to the new film, really. And as for everyone joining us here today, thank you for attending our live stream. And please join us on April 23rd for our upcoming Palestine Film Friday. And if you haven't done so already, like us on our Facebook, our Instagram, and donate into our nonprofit organization at www.palestinianfilmfest.com/sponsor. Finally, be on the lookout for our annual film festival this fall. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And everyone, thanks again for attending. Thank you.